On July the 16th of 2022, a Welsh woman by the name of Rebecca Press accompanied her mother's best friend for a night of revelrous drinking in Elliotstown, Caerphilly. The 31-year-old had been staying with her mother following a breakup, and according to subsequent reports, she'd been drinking in the house during the hours leading up to her night out with 57-year-old Mark Ash, who lived next door. The pair reportedly went to the New Tredegar Rugby Club and the Dynevor Arms pub, then headed back to Press's mother's house before midnight. Upon arriving back home, Press was informed by her brother Gavin that the man from whom she'd recently split had been having an affair. In a fury of unfettered emotions, Press grabbed a 3-inch kitchen knife and plunged it into Ash's chest while he was trying to calm her down. She then walked into her mother's bedroom and calmly stated that she'd stabbed her best friend. Press fled the scene before the arrival of law enforcement, but she did leave a chilling message on her ex-boyfriend's phone in which she divulged, "I've just stabbed someone and killed them. I've just murdered someone. Please phone me now." In the early hours of the following morning, the police located Press and took her into custody on suspicion of murder, to which she feigned shock and ignorance, saying to the arresting officers, "On suspicion of what? What? Has someone died?" In court, it emerged that in addition to the copious amounts of alcohol she'd consumed prior to the fatal stabbing, Press had also taken 4 Valium earlier in the day, which had only served to make her more unstable and unable to think clearly. The woman initially denied murder, claiming self-defense, but changed her plea to guilty 5 days into the criminal trial. In January of 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 20 years. Number 7. Michael Golsalki. Greater Manchester Police were called to the parking lot of a Premier Inn in Stockport one day in the fall of 2019 after receiving reports that a heavily intoxicated man was attempting to have intercourse with a pile of leaves. Upon arrival, officers attempted to coax the man out from the bushes where he'd hidden himself after his public display of intimacy was witnessed by several families who were dining at a restaurant next door. After about 10 minutes, 26-year-old Michael Golsalki finally emerged from the bush. He gave no explanation for his actions while being taken into custody for public indecency. Following his arrest, it was determined that Golsalki had consumed undisclosed amounts of alcohol, cannabis, and cocaine before the incident. Hotel staff had reportedly noticed him acting suspiciously in the parking lot right before he dropped his trousers to his ankles and began thrusting himself on a mound of fall leaves. Golsalki, who was said to be entirely embarrassed by his behavior, was jailed for 8 weeks and ordered to pay a $158 fine as a consequence for pleading guilty to cannabis possession and public indecency. Number 6. Abigail Cyannnington. The police in Miami, Florida, were called to the 5500 block of Northwest 12th Court on the night of January the 7th of 2023. 20-year-old Abigail Cyannnington was accused of going berserk during an argument with one of her roommates, whom she repeatedly stabbed with a kitchen knife. The resulting arrest report detailed that Hennington and the female victim had begun arguing after the latter mentioned that her phone was missing. The third roommate, a man, told law enforcement he'd just left the apartment to speak with a neighbor when he heard a sudden pained scream from inside. He rushed back in to find the victim bleeding and walking towards the front porch before collapsing on the floor. Hennington fled the scene while the injured roommate was taken to a local hospital to undergo surgery. A short time later, officers tracked Hennington down to a gas station, where she was taken into custody on a charge of attempted murder. She was held at the Turner Guilford Knight Correctional Center without bond. Number 5. John Ralph. Deputies from the Carter County Sheriff's Office in Tennessee were dispatched to a house on Reynolds Road, shared by an elderly woman and her adult son, on April the 6th of 2019. The homeowner, 76-year-old Edith Betty Ralph, was found dead inside with a number of severe injuries to her body. She had not only sustained blunt force trauma to the head, but also presented with multiple gunshot wounds. After an investigation was launched, detectives learned that the victim's son, John, had made several suspicious statements to friends, family, and co-workers that indicated he might have been involved in the killing. The 51-year-old reportedly told relatives that living with Edith had been driving him crazy. Furthermore, on the day the body was discovered, John had asked colleagues to take pictures of him at work because he'd need an alibi if anything happened to his mother. Authorities intercepted the man at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta, where he was attempting to board a flight to Amsterdam. He was arrested and held at Clayton County Jail in Georgia on a $1 million bond pending his extradition back to Tennessee. John eventually agreed to a plea deal that reduced his charge from first-degree murder to second-degree murder. He was sent to prison for 22 years and, as per state law, wouldn't be eligible for release until serving out the entire sentence. Number 4. Nude Texas Man. In April of 2016, articles surfaced online about an incident involving a completely naked man roaming a suburban neighborhood in Austin, Texas. The eye-catching headlines were supplemented by a video in which the individual, who wasn't named, could be heard babbling nonsensically as he sat on the ground in handcuffs, surrounded by police officers. Law enforcement had reportedly been called to the scene after receiving reports about the nude man taking letters and papers right out of people's mailboxes and trying to eat them. In the recording, it's clear that the man was exceedingly intoxicated at the time of his revealing outburst, but it wasn't publicly disclosed what substance or substances he'd ingested. Amid intermittent singing, laughing, and chatting, the man at one point lay down on his back and reiterated, "I'm sentient, I'm alive," as though needing to confirm it for himself. When an ambulance finally arrived to take him to the hospital for evaluation, the man breathed a sigh of relief, saying, "Thank you, Gary. Thanks, everybody. All right, show's over." He then shouted, "I am Merlin," as he was being taken away. The individual who posted the video online captioned it, "A man on drugs attacked my mailman and ate my 1099 tax form. Seriously." Number 3. Malcolm Waite. A deadly car accident took place on the A149 road in Stalham, Norfolk, England, on July the 31st of 2022. Responding police officers discovered that a Lexus RX SUV had mounted the curb while traveling at speed and consequently made contact with a pair of young women on the sidewalk. One of the victims, an unnamed 16-year-old girl, survived the collision with only some cuts and bruises. Meanwhile, 20-year-old Fenella Hawes, who was reportedly carrying flowers when she was hit, died at the scene. In the tragic incident's aftermath, one of the officers who subsequently took the driver of the Lexus into custody described him as the drunkest person he's ever seen behind the wheel of a car in his 10 years on the force. The ensuing police investigation established that the weather and road conditions had been more than adequate on the day of the crash, and the Lexus was in perfect working order. The motorist, 68-year-old Malcolm Waite, was thus identified as the sole reason for the fatal accident. When news of Waite's arrest surfaced online, the police released body cam footage of the moment he was removed from his vehicle, which he wrecked after driving another mile down the road. In the video, he slurred his words as he sat in the driver's seat next to a bottle of vodka. Waite refused a breathalyzer test and was taken to James Paget University Hospital in Golsalki, where his blood alcohol content was measured to be nearly 5 times the legal limit. In November of 2022, the man was jailed for a period of 8 years after pleading guilty to causing death by dangerous driving. He was also banned from driving for 7 years after his release and would need to complete a driving course in order to have his license reinstated. Number 2. Jeanette Oliver. A Chicago woman's unhinged attack on a teenage girl's pet dog in December of 2022 resulted in her facing criminal consequences. According to local media, 61-year-old Jeanette Oliver sparked up a conversation with the 15-year-old girl while she was out walking her family's Chihuahua near Oliver's residence on West Irving Park Road. Moments into their interaction, Oliver suddenly seemed to lose control of herself as she lunged for the dog and stabbed him with a knife. The girl took off with her injured canine, but Oliver pursued them and plunged the knife into the animal several more times. After that, she fled the scene, dropping the blade about a block away from where the altercation occurred. The teen girl's father reportedly tracked Oliver down and held her until law enforcement arrived to arrest her. She was charged with aggravated cruelty to an animal and aggravated assault. Many were left concerned about the dog named Bebe following the unprovoked attack, but fears were alleviated when the Garrido Stray Rescue Foundation updated the animal's prognosis on social media. The post revealed that Bebe had undergone surgery for his serious injuries, but that he was expected to make a full recovery. Before we move on to number 1, be sure to keep watching after if you haven't seen our previous video on when getting lost goes wrong. Similar title, very different video. Number 1. Rakian Figueroa. On the morning of January the 10th of 2023, Rakian Figueroa went haywire inside a Mediterranean restaurant in Brooklyn called Carver, where his ex-girlfriend worked. The 42-year-old man reportedly barged into the eatery by hurling a chair at the front door, then repeatedly stabbed his ex with a knife. The victim, 39-year-old Irene Guzman, was brought to a hospital where she was said to be in stable condition. Figueroa subsequently went on the run, prompting Guzman to go into hiding for fear of suffering another attack at the hands of her violent ex. The woman's family revealed to local media outlet News 12 that Figueroa had come after her on 3 separate occasions over a 2-month period. He'd been wanted since December the 4th of 2022, when he allegedly slashed her face and was consequently given a temporary restraining order. A few days after the incident at Carver, the NYPD finally apprehended the man, according to Guzman's family. Number 7. Alexander Lofgren and Emily Henkel. In April of 2021, a couple went missing in California's Death Valley National Park at a time when temperatures in the region reached a maximum of 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Alexandra Lofgren and Emily Henkel, aged 32 and 27 respectively, were both described as experienced campers. As an army veteran who'd served in Afghanistan, Lofgren was reported to have dealt with harsh environments in the past. The couple had failed to return from their camping trip for Easter dinner on Sunday and was reported missing on Tuesday, April the 6th. An extensive search operation was launched and their Subaru SUV was found the following day. Inside the vehicle there was a note which read, 2 flat tires, headed to Mormon Point, have 3 days worth of water. While making the arduous trek towards their destination, the couple encountered a 70-foot cliff and waterfall. As Lofgren looked for a way down, he lost his grip and fell from the rock formation, suffering fatal injuries. Henkel tried to reach him and had made some progress on the waterfall part of the way, but she too eventually plummeted, breaking her ankle. In the days that followed, she worked to survive in the remote area until both she and Lofgren were found by a rescue helicopter on April the 8th. Because of the rugged terrain, they could only be extracted the following day at about 11:30 a.m. Lofgren's body was taken to a coroner for further investigation, while Henkel, who survived, was transported to a hospital. Number 6. Owen Lewis. A young Englishman died in the French Alps in early January of 2018 while trying to find his way to his holiday apartment at the Rissoul ski resort. 22-year-old Owen Lewis, originally from Coventry, was last seen drinking alone at the La Grotte du Yeti bar early on January the 2nd. He was waiting for a group to join him in Rissoul the following day. Lewis was reported missing by his friends and family after they couldn't reach him over the phone and social media. A search was launched, and a few days later, on January the 5th, a helicopter from the National Gendarmerie spotted a body in the snow near a mountain stream. Officers arriving on foot recognized the remains as Lewis from the missing person posters that had been placed at the Yeti, and the man's identity was confirmed through his passport. The bar was only a few hundred yards from Lewis's accommodation, but he was believed to have taken a wrong turn after leaving the establishment. His disorientation, potentially alcohol-induced, had taken him only a few hundred yards from the Yeti, near a mountain stream. Footprints in the snow indicated he'd gotten lost before succumbing to hypothermia. Number 5. Albert Krashian. In March of 2011, Canadian man Albert Krashian and his wife Rita left their home in British Columbia and headed for a trade show in Las Vegas. Coming down from Oregon, they planned to make a stop on the Nevada border in the town of Jackpot and search for the quickest route on their GPS. The couple, both in their 50s, was captured on surveillance footage at an Oregon gas station on March the 19th. The navigational system then led them back to a road through a treacherous mountain region for which they were drastically unprepared. As they tried to power through the rough terrain, their Chevrolet van, which was over a decade old and had only front-wheel drive, got stuck in the mud. 3 days elapsed with them fruitlessly trying to free the vehicle, and a decision was made that Albert would set out on foot to find help. He started walking through the muddy terrain, marking the last time that Rita ever saw him alive. 7 weeks passed, with the Cretan's friends and family presuming that they died but having no concrete indication of what had happened to them. Then, 3 hunters searching for game in the area stumbled upon the van, which had colorful blankets draped from the windows to attract attention. Inside, they spotted Rita, alive but severely weakened. They alerted emergency services and a helicopter airlifted the woman to a hospital, where she received treatment and subsequently recovered. Over the course of 7 weeks, she'd survived by eating boiled sweets, trail mix, and drinking water from a stream. She was forced to ration her dwindling supplies, losing 20 to 30 pounds in the process. Search and rescue crews scoured the area in the aftermath but found no trace of Albert. His body was discovered roughly 18 months later and identified through the business cards found on his body. He was within 6 miles of Mountain City, but his GPS battery had likely failed and he began walking too far uphill in deep snow, before eventually dying from exposure to the elements. An Elko County Sheriff's deputy described Albert as a courageous man for having made it as far as he did. Number 4. Spiriton Vinokurov. In March of 2013, while traveling to visit relatives in the Sakha Republic, Russia, a hunter got lost and nearly perished in the Siberian wilderness. 48-year-old Spiriton Vinokurov was heading to the village of Alekokuyel, located about 75 miles from his lodge. As he'd later tell a media outlet, Vinokurov was checking his traps along the way and had failed to notice the signs of an impending snowstorm. As the blizzard engulfed him, the hunter became disoriented, and then the petrol ran out in his snowmobile. He began trudging through the snow in Russia's most unforgiving terrain, hoping that he'd encounter another vehicle. At some point during his plight, a pair of wolves began stalking Vinokurov. The hungry predators kept their distance while the hunter was walking upright, but after 4 days, Vinokurov could only muster up enough strength to crawl. It was then that the wolves closed in on him. He would subsequently recount, "They cut the distance sharply and were literally breathing down my neck." Bone-tired and extremely cold, Vinokurov resigned himself to his fate and dropped face down in the snow, knowing he'd either freeze to death or be eaten alive by wolves. Fortunately, not long after, he was spotted by a rescue helicopter. The crew found Vinokurov barely conscious and badly frostbitten. He was airlifted to a hospital where he received urgent treatment, with doctors determining that he didn't require any amputation. Number 3. Cecil Knutson and Diana Bedwell. In May of 2015, California couple Cecil Knutson and Diana Bedwell got lost in a desert area of San Diego County as they were heading to meet family in Palm Springs. 79-year-old Knutson and Bedwell, aged 68, were last seen leaving the Valley View Casino in Valley Center on May the 10th. They were expected to meet their son, Robert Acosta, for a Mother's Day dinner. They never got there, nor returned to their Orange County home. Acosta feared that they'd been kidnapped or that their car had rolled down a hill, as over the course of several days, multiple ground and aerial searches of the backcountry were carried out. It would eventually emerge that the couple had gotten lost after taking what they believed to be a shortcut. Realizing that they'd made a mistake, Knutson tried to back up their 2014 white Hyundai Sonata, but struck a large rock. The vehicle got stuck on the rugged road near a Boy Scouts camp on the Los Coyotes Indian Reservation close to Warner Springs. The couple, both of whom were diabetics who required insulin treatment, were unable to move forward. They didn't have any supplies and, using the car as shelter, survived by eating oranges and the banana pie that they'd intended to take to Acosta's home. After 7 days, Knutson passed away. Bedwell ate orange peels and drank rainwater over the days that followed. The woman was found alive and severely dehydrated 2 weeks after she and Knutson had gotten lost. Bedwell, who attributed her survival to faith, had also lived through a gruesome family tragedy approximately 5 decades prior in 1965. Her teenage sister, Sylvia Likens, succumbed to extensive injuries and malnourishment after being subjected to spine-chilling torture at the hands of caregiver Gertrude Banishewski, her children, and their neighborhood friends. The incident is often described as the worst and most sadistic crime to have ever taken place in the state of Indiana. Today's topic was requested by Miss Tina Hamilton and Y2K Goose. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Leonard Barry Weller. In 2021, a British pensioner was lost for 3 days in a Thai jungle while on his way to meet some friends. 72-year-old Leonard Barry Weller, originally from Hastings, was riding his motorbike towards the province of Kon Kaen in the country's northeast. He became disoriented after entering dense woodland while traveling on an unfamiliar route, and with temperatures rising to roughly 95 degrees Fahrenheit, climbed a hill in an effort to find a path. Weller then couldn't trace his steps back to his motorbike before he was caught in a monsoon storm and forced to find shelter. He ate nothing for 3 days as he pressed onwards and tried to walk his way out of the jungle, which is known for dangerous fauna including bears and venomous snakes. Weller survived by drinking water from puddles while using a piece of grass as a straw. His wife, 49-year-old Tawi, alerted the authorities after not hearing from him, and a search party was sent out. A local hunter eventually found Weller lying on a leaf bed with no shoes on. The expat was recorded emerging from the jungle unshaven with an open shirt and his legs covered in cuts. International news outlets shared a video of the emotional moment in which he was reunited with Tawi. Weller praised his rescuers and tearfully stated, "I'm wonderfully happy. I've never been so happy in my life." Number 1. Adrian Knobs. A Michigan hunter survived for a week in the Alaskan wilderness in the fall of 2013 as he was battered by storms with no shelter or warm clothing and only 4 granola bars for sustenance. The trouble began roughly 3 days into the hunting trip, on which 51-year-old Adrian Knobs was accompanied by Garrett Hagan, aged 24. They'd sailed a 50-foot boat up the Chickamin River, moored up and went ashore in a small skiff. At some point, Hagan shot an 800-pound grizzly bear. The pair skinned it and placed the meat on the small watercraft. Knobs remained behind while Hagan took it back to the larger vessel. The latter never returned, and his body was found 11 days after they'd separated, roughly 30 miles away. It's believed that he drowned while trying to get to the boat. With the skiff gone and with most of his equipment on the main boat, Knobs was stranded in dire circumstances. Swimming back to the vessel in the frigid waters would have resulted in him freezing to death. Additionally, no one would be looking for him since the trip was meant to last for 7 more days. Knobs moved to higher ground. As the days passed, he didn't lie down on the sodden earth and instead tied himself to tree roots, which also enabled him to withstand constant rain and stormy conditions. Inclement weather wasn't the only threat, as he was also in an area known for the presence of bears and wolves. He rationed the granola bars, eating just 1 per day, and estimated to have only got a few hours of sleep throughout his ordeal. At one point, believing he was going to die, the hunter carved a message into the butt of his rifle which read, "A. Knobs, stuck on river tidal flat for 5 days. Cold, wet, no food. Garrett Hagan, Craig, AK died, taking Big Bear to boat 9/15/13. The boat in which he'd arrived eventually broke its mooring and floated away, but was subsequently spotted by a Coast Guard helicopter. Rescuers found Knobs on the brink of death with swollen joints and fingers. He survived but suffered nerve damage that rendered him unable to walk long distances without resting. Thanks for watching. Would you rather succumb to mind control at the hands of a comic book-esque supervillain or lose all memory of the last 2 years? Let us know in the comments section below.